Okay, so we are back, and today's video is a simple question. Who is Jake Paul's next opponent? Like I said, sounds simple, right? Well, the answer itself is kind of complicated. Now, hear me out because my case is more rock solid than the evidence that the Liver King was on steroids the entire time while he was teaching you guys how to walk and talk like a caveman. Now, this won't be as easy to prove as that was, but I do think I know Jake's next opponent, and I'm going to tell you why. But before we do that, a couple things, guys. I am live this Saturday for Tyson Fury and Derek Chisora, and on my second channel, I'm live for the USA-Netherlands game. And last thing, make sure you guys are subbed here at the channel because we are only 30,000 away from our goal for this year of 300,000. Let's make December a month to remember by hitting that sub button and taking the Wade concept to the next level. Like I said, I think I have the answer for who Jake's next opponent is, and it's because history finds a way to repeat itself. What do I mean? The breakdown. Let's go. All right, so a week or so ago, Jake came out on Twitter and said he had 3 contracts out to 3 different people for a fight potentially in February. Now, we know since that time frame, 2 of those people have been identified as Tommy Fury and Nate Diaz. There is a third mystery man in that equation. The question is, who is that, and how likely is that to be Jake's next opponent? So let's run through all 3. Now, let's start with the mystery man because, quite frankly, I have no fucking clue who it could be, which leads me to believe it's the least likely possible answer because Jake's never pulled the rabbit out of the hat and said, here's this random individual that I'm going to fight that you guys don't give a fuck about. What I mean is, not that Jake doesn't love the sport of boxing, but it does have to make dollars to make sense for him. The first name is the mystery man that comes to mind for Jake is Andrew Tate. Is that fight realistic? In my opinion, no. I don't think that Jake and Andrew Tate are going to be fighting each other. Not because it's not a fun fight, because it is. I think Jake does get the better of him, but I have told you this already. I think they're trying to do business together, not throw fists at each other. Possibly, again, to promote fights in Dubai after seeing the colossal nightmare that Global Titans was.
A whole bunch of games, it seemed like, and then Global Titans didn't really do anything or do their due diligence to try to make things work and sort it out, and eventually I was kicked off the card, flights canceled, kicked out the hotel.
So no, I don't think Andrew Tate is the guy. I think, again, if Andrew's going to fight a Paul brother, it's going to be Logan. That fight makes a lot more sense than Jake, in my opinion, anyway, so I don't think he's the mystery guy. And I can't see Jake fighting some random pro boxer with a good record that, I'm sorry, boxing community, no one fucking knows, because Jake would then have to carry the event by himself. And we've seen the trajectory of buy rates for Jake events. He doesn't fight individuals people are interested in, they don't do well.
Anderson Silva, massive name, draws what I would assume the entire MMA community. It didn't get and make as much noise as I thought it would. Do you know how many pay-per-view buys it got yet?
I don't. I think it'll probably go around like 200,000 to 300,000,
really?
Which is kind of upsetting.
I'm not saying that's Jake's fault, but when the people don't get behind the person trying to fight Jake, business doesn't sell, and that means Jake as a draw diminishes. So if you eliminate the pro boxers on the higher level, because Jake's not ready for that, and outside of that, you could try to do like the celebrity pro boxer crossover, like a guy like Joe Fournier, but again, does that really make any, like, why would Jake fight Joe Fournier? There's not really any kind of beef except for the one time where Joe Fournier was on Jake's event, had Jake's girl rooting for him in the corner and like kind of cornering him. That was fucking weird, right? A win for Jake wouldn't really prove anything to the majority of people, and Jake does like to prove things, how good he's getting in the sport, why he should be respected as a boxer. Beating Joe Fournier while Joe is 9-0, the name value and the recognition of the people he's beaten don't really matter to anybody. So if you're still talking about this mystery guy and you say, okay, well, the pro boxing scene isn't where it's at, what does Jake normally do? He goes and gets MMA fighter. And if it's not Nate Diaz, who we're going to talk about in a second, then who could be a possible MMA fighter that's coming over to the boxing scene to fight Jake? And I know that Jake has gone back and forth with Paddy Pimblett this week, and they were talking about doing $1 million spar, which Paddy was actually down for. I'd be down to see it, put some cameras on that. That's a fun one. I highly doubt that, one, that's going to be allowed to happen in the UFC PI, as Paddy Pimblett said he wanted to do. And 2, I don't think that Paddy Pimblett's going to go to Puerto Rico and answer Jake's call again because Uncle Dana probably is not going to allow that to happen. So mystery man, in my opinion, is a wash. I don't know who it is, or even if there was a contract sent out to an individual. I think that might just be a little bit of mind games from Jake. The other 2 contracts that apparently were sent out to say, hey, listen, you 2, get your shit together or I have a third man waiting in the wings like WCW in the 1990s. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the 2 most likely opponents, I think, for Jake. We'll start with Nate Diaz. I think Nate is a good option for a couple of reasons. One, the people love Nate Diaz. He is not only Stockton's hero, but really the entirety of the bullshit, let's just fight community's hero. The guy is not there for games. He's not there for respect. It's really going to be a who's more gangster off. Like, you'll see the worst quality of Jake Paul's cringe gangster side come out. You know, the stuff where he's talking about how he's from the mud, but Westlake, Ohio is a upper middle class community. But those two going back and forth will be entertaining. I mean, Nate already slapped the teetotal shit out of Jake's tattoo-headed breathing coach. So no, Nate wouldn't be a pure boxer. And the boxing Twitter heads would all say,
look, Jake's not fighting a boxer. When's he gonna be in there with a real Marcus of Queensberry trained boxer?
I've never bought into that. Anderson Silva is a better boxer than most of the guys that Jake would be fighting as a low-level pro boxer right now. And I think Nate Diaz, while not being as good of a stand-up striker as Anderson Silva by any stretch, does present Jake some problems in the mental side and with the fact that he does seem like he can just get hit with anything. Jake hasn't just tuned him up to the degree where there's cuts all over his scar tissue-ridden face, and Nate's starting to have success, and he's starting to work that body, and all of a sudden this fight becomes close in the end. Just ask Leon Edwards. It only takes one from a Diaz brother, and the whole world gets shaken up. And as much as I'd like that fight and how entertaining the buildup would be, and the fight itself, in my opinion, would actually be, history tells me that's not what they're doing. Now let's take a look back at that word history, because that's what I'm basing a lot of this off of. Jake and Tommy has to happen, and twice it should have already happened. These two have history. They've been scheduled to fight twice. People are saying this is the Khabib and Tony of our crossover boxing generation. Tommy gets injured in the first one, pulls out. Tommy not able to fight in the second one because he can't get to the fucking US. And now they're in talks once again, and it looks like back and forth. No one can agree on anything, but don't let that deter you because it's happened before. Remember when Jake wanted to fight Tommy the first time, there was all this talk about Tommy wanting $1 million to just get out of bed, and that Jake was giving time frames on Tommy to sign the contract or he was moving on. Turns out the fight got signed, and while it didn't actually happen, it just goes to show you these public contract talks from Jake and Tommy, no matter how doom and gloom they look, usually result in an agreement. It happened the second time as well, where Tommy kind of went dark and Jake was just barking at him on social media. They ended up settling on a fight, whatever the number was. And again, fight didn't happen. The Fury family's got Drake-level mob ties, apparently, so that couldn't happen in America, but it was also signed and ready to go. Now we're here the third time, and there's already confusion between who's going to promote the fight and who's going to be paying who, where Jake's team is saying, we're offering you 7 figures. Tommy and I guess his team, which is now Global Titans, is saying, we're counter-offering more money. But all I see this as is a game between both camps. My assumption is Tommy still thinks he's the A side in all this, which is absolutely not true. Jake does not need Tommy. Tommy absolutely needs Jake. And I know this because I, like Jake, was at Global Titans, and I, like Jake, heard the boos in the arena, sitting ringside, and now you hear the crowd.
He's getting booed, right?
Those are confirmed boos here. And I, not like Jake, stayed awake to watch his fight, and people did not care. Even outside of all of that bullshit, I still think this fight happens. Believe it or not, I think this is the next one because of a couple of things. One, Jake desperately wants that respect from boxing and knows he needs to get Tommy now before he continues making a fool of himself and doesn't have that credibility that Jake is looking for by beating a boxer. And two, because of what he said in a podcast today.
Tommy Fury is creating all these smoke and mirrors, and he's ducking. He wouldn't respond to my DM. I sent him a DM like, yo, you have the offer in your inbox. Like, let's make this fight happen for the fans.
And he ghosted you?
And he just hasn't even opened it. At this point, I think he's just playing us to just get the brand recognition.
You can hear it and see it right there. Look at the way that Jake's body language is when he's talking about this Tommy Fury fight. It's almost like he's just trying to will it into existence. He understands it was a bigger fight than it maybe even is now. He also understands the Fury name and the respect he gains from taking down a Fury. Jake's opponents have always had legacy behind the name. Even Ben Askren, multiple-time MMA champion. Tyron Woodley, multiple-time MMA champion. Anderson Silva, arguably the greatest MMA fighter that's ever lived. Tommy Fury is the brother of arguably the greatest heavyweight in our generation. You look at all of the lineage, this is why Jake is, in my opinion, going to fight Tommy Fury, and why he's so frustrated that he's DMing Tommy Fury and saying, what the fuck are we doing here? You're either fighting me or we're never doing this again, because to Jake, Tommy's last name is more valuable than his first. And again, you do have to look at the entire situation. There's a lot that Tommy wants out of this as well, right? And that's why the games are being played. Tommy, as much as he says he's a fighting man and doesn't want to dabble in the crossover scene, he absolutely does, or he wouldn't be making such a big stink about fighting Jake Paul. I need this amount of money. You have to do it here on my terms. But he understands he's a bit more valuable because of his last name to Jake, so he's milking it. I think that's the fight they want. I think that's the fight that ends up happening, because no matter what Jake tries, he's never answered that question, can he beat a boxer? And I know Jake's a millionaire and he understands the game and he's a great marketer. He still is a competitor. He still likes to prove people wrong. I think Tommy Fury is the perfect fit for that, because again, we've been here before. Twice, actually, and history has a funny way of repeating itself. That's what I think. Jake's next opponent, probably going to be Tommy Fury. I think I got a solid case for why, but if I'm wrong, you guys let me know down below. And also, remember, we're only 30K away from that 300,000 sub goal. And if we hit it before the end of the year, let's just say we're all having a little celebration. What happens come February? Is it Tommy Fury? Is it Nate Diaz? Is it mystery man number 3? I don't have those answers. And right now, neither does Jake. But if they're going to do this right and start to build the card correctly in the next month or so, I think we find out.